All right, now let's actually put this custom mode into use. This is probably the most foundational custom mode for any time I'm building a specific app. I always start with the product requirements document, or the PRD. This custom mode is perfect because it's a perfect balance between a product manager and a technical architect or engineer. It brings a hybrid between how the product should be built and the technical aspects of it that go behind the scenes. Now, the most important thing is when you're using this PRD generator, ensure you have all the right settings in place. I always just make sure that I have tools enabled, advanced options, prompt is right, and we have the set model in place as well. We're using a thinking model here, O3, which is really good at sequential thinking. And the most important thing is that we just have all those checkmarks in place. You'll see that I have MCPs enabled. We're not going to use MCPs in this instance here for this PRD generator, but I'll show you what that looks like in another example. Just to be quick, you can use it, for example, like a Perplexity search MCP, where you'll do a search on a specific topic, use that as research or context, and then pull that in to actually inform and generate a PRD based on whatever research the MCP brought back for you. But we're not going to be doing that in this case because it's just not necessary. Now, the most important thing is that once you have the prompt and the settings in place, we're going to get started with building our first initial PRD. We're going to keep these simple. We're going to call this prd.md. Now, you'll see I use MD files quite a bit. This is just a personal preference. You can use .text files or .md. I use MD because I can then just interchange all these files, or I guess they're very interoperable. I can use this in Obsidian or other tools. Markdown is very broad and universal. It's accepted and used everywhere. It's just a personal preference. I recommend you probably stick with the MD file format. Now, in this prompt specifically, this PRD generator is not only going to give you from a product aspect of what the persona should look like, the core user stories or the ICP or the key features, but it gives you a breakdown of the app scaffolding. It gives you an idea of what the schema structure would look like. It gives you an idea of the system architecture diagram and a detailed task breakdown. This is important because it's putting together a plan that's considering all of this and a full breakdown of this. Because it's giving you a full breakdown of the database schema, the scaffolding, the thinking model is doing all this for you, so that when you switch to an agent model as a developer to execute on this, it doesn't have to use a lot of context and input to actually make those decisions because it's already thought out for. Now, you'll see that this PRD already has some recommendations on the technical stack and what it should use. In most common apps, React is used as the framework. It's a JavaScript framework. If you're not familiar with this, I do recommend you actually just get an overview or primer on just programming languages and how apps are built. Maybe I'll do a separate module on this and just give you a high-level overview of all the different languages. But commonly used programming languages are JavaScript with React and TypeScript, sometimes Next.js, Svelte. Now, React is important because it's so commonly accepted and used by a lot of developers, but also if you're building in Bolt or Lovable, they also use React. And if sometimes you'll see people actually build in Lovable and then migrate to Cursor with their code base to keep building on it. And it's just a very universal programming language. Also the backend, the database, Supabase is very common. So people typically build in React, they use Supabase, and they use a framework called Next.js, which is a package that helps kind of the code all together from a lot of the things you would need to make an application functional. And then they use Supabase as the database to connect real information in the database to the front end and then host it on something like Vercel or Vercel. In this instance, we are going to be using React. We are going to be using Supabase. I'll show you where you can deploy some of this code base in later modules as we build this kind of MVP app. But for now, just think about the fact that we're going to be using React and then also using Tailwind as the utility styling class. A lot of apps that have styling, they use something called CSS. You can write CSS directly in there, or you can use a package like Tailwind, which is a set of utility classes that you can apply to your code base, quickly build designs and quickly build the front end without having to actually write it yourself. Again, this is not a Tailwind or programming deep dive. I'll provide some resources for that, but I'll cover it in maybe a separate module, just going through what that actually looks like. So we have our PRD file, and I usually just like to write down what my end outcome is or what I'd like to do, which is create a simple job board curating no-code jobs like for Webflow, Framer, Make.com, NAN, and similar roles. For the MVP, I want to keep it simple. I only want to have mock data on the front end and no database. Now, the key thing here is I always want to, when I'm building a product, is to just isolate what the minimum viable product looks like. What is the just initial version of this product without having to connect to a backend or a server, and I just want to get it up and running to see what it looks like. So what I wrote down is keep it simple, mock data on the front end, no database connection, and typically job boards have 3 roles: people that can view jobs on the main page, employers to post jobs, and the admins to review, approve, delete jobs. For MVP, just focus on the public-facing jobs, job board with mock data. This just keeps things simple so we can get things going, and then we'll work backwards to connect the database. We just want to make sure that we get the MVP where we can just see the jobs and see what it looks like, and then we'll think about how we connect the database. So what we're going to do is in the chat interface here, we're going to reference the PRD. You can drag it over, or ultimately you can go prd.md and add this as context. Or if you wanted to, you can actually go at PRD, and I'll write here, make sure I have the mode selected, say, based on this initial PRD, please complete it and make it comprehensive. All right, we're going to hit send. And what's going to happen is 2 things. Sometimes these thinking models, again, we talked about how they're difficult to make tool calls sometimes. It may actually make the tool call and edit the file, or give you the response like it is right now in the chat, and then you have to prompt it to say, hey, add it to the actual file. So I'm glad this happened because I want to show you sometimes how tool calls and fails if you're not very explicit. If I were to revise this prompt, and I'm going to do it to show you, I would actually say, make sure you add it to prd.md. That happens and it's completely normal. But what's really special about this PRD generator is it's going to give you the scaffolding and also Mermaid diagrams on how you would build out the flow or the data flow between the entire architecture of the app itself with the database schema, which is insane because it is all the thinking for you. It's very comprehensive from a feature standpoint as well. So it failed a tool call. It wasn't able to actually create the system architecture diagram. And you'll see the code behind the diagram, but the tool call failed. And what we can do is, why don't we actually get the model to add this to PRD MD and update the doc. And then what I'll do is I'll switch the model. Anytime your prompts don't work, likely it's an issue with the model itself or the way you've prompted. And I'll cover the key aspects of prompt engineering, but you always want to give a context and be very direct as to whether it should run an MCP or update a file, and try to give it as targeted as possible to avoid any errors. You can see that now it's actually updating the PRD file with what we've talked about. So in this instance, it's going to go ahead and update the PRD file, and we can say, make sure you include, so you saw how I added the plus button. You can actually insert a message whilst thinking through. Make sure to include the Mermaid diagrams as well. So we insert a new message, and hopefully it'll actually update the diagrams and add the entire PRD in there. So as you can see here, we have the entire PRD itself in there. I'm just going to remove this. It did not update or edit that part, but we have a very comprehensive PRD based on what was provided. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the model to Claude 4 Sonnet and say, can you please generate more Mermaid diagrams based on the flows and how to approach development. I want to have full context to prepare for development. And let's see what it creates with Mermaid diagrams and if we can add it back into the file. So it's going to create very comprehensive Mermaid diagrams based on the PRD to make sure that we have full comprehensive plan on what this MVP will look like. Now, something interesting is happening here. I'm seeing the PRD tool call is taking some time, and this is likely because I'm using a max thinking model, which is not the right approach. So I'm actually going to press stop, change the model, go to Claude 4 Sonnet, and I'll say, include it in the doc and in this chat so I can see what it looks like. And hopefully, in this instance, I'll remove max mode so it's not doing advanced reasoning and thinking because it doesn't need to. And it can create these number diagrams and just make the tool calls so we can get done and move on to the next step. And it's gone ahead and actually added more Mermaid diagrams. This is not necessarily all the time, but we're just showing the primary user journey and what that is. So you can see right here what the flow looks like, which is pretty cool. The MVP data flow. So basically it's going to use Next.js page load, React state management, One thing I don't like is I actually don't want to use Next.js. This is just a technical preference. I want to keep things simple and just use React Router. Look, it even created a development workflow of what that process would look like on a day basis. So imagine if you're actually a product manager and you want to create a development timeline, which is insane. And then say management flow, development strategy and approach. It failed the last tool call. Just it has all of the comprehensive flows in place. The only thing I would do is just say, I don't want to use Next.js. I want to keep it super simple. What are my options? This is just a personal preference. There are no right or wrong way to do this. I probably maybe want to use, I think it may recommend React Router. I'm not too sure. It's something that I just have a personal preference towards. Yeah. Oh, it's going to say Vite. Yeah. Or Vite. Perfect. Yeah. Nullify or Vercel. Perfect. Yeah. So what's really cool is that it talked about what it's recommending, why it's great, and how you set it up, and essentially how simple it is. And then a comparison. So PHTML, CSS, React plus Vite, Vite is Vite. We're going to go with React and Vite or Vite. I'm not too sure on the pronunciation. I agree with the recommendation. Modern developments, component reusability, easy state management. This is perfect. We're ready to move on to the next step.